plane trees, which keeps it shadowed and comfortable all summer long, unlike many other playgrounds in the city, which can get, unfortunately, very hot. But I'm here to say that we received a $5,000 grant as part of the Park Activity Initiative. Thank you, from Councilman Mark Levine's office. Thank you very much. And we are trying to figure out how to spend that money. We're going to be putting up a message board, probably garbage cans, which will be rat-proof-ish. And we're also going to be looking at maybe some additional horticulture and some gardening. It's going to look fabulous in the spring. I hope you'll join us. Friends of Annabella Viola's Playground, FOAAP.org.
Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Peter Harnson.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm here from the Columbus Amsterdam Business Improvement District. We're north of 96th Street. And on the tables outside, there are our events calendars for the month of March. A couple of things coming up. We have a free walking tour on the 11th. And on the 19th, there will be a history talk at the youth hostel on 103rd and Amsterdam on sculpture in the neighborhood. It'll be Jim Mackin speaking about the people that were portrayed in the sculptures and the sculptors that made them and where they are. Anyway, if you'd like it, it'll be outside on the table. Thank you.
Our land use co-chairs are not here, so I'm going to. We'll start with the Housing Committee.
Thank you, everybody. Apologies for the delay. So the Housing Committee this month, well, actually, we've looked at it 2 months, but evidently, if you're a rent-stabilized apartment, a number of years ago, we passed a law that said that you could only look back 4 years in your rent history, and if there was an error where a landlord had taken your apartment out of stabilization illegally, if it happened before 4 years, there wasn't much you could do about it. And Assembly Member Rosenthal has proposed a bill to change that back so that you can look beyond the 4-year look back. And so the Housing Committee has prepared a resolution in support of her bill, which is bill number 84003. And Susan, maybe you'd like to say a little more.
It's pretty straightforward. We've been working on this for about 7 or 8 years. We continue to try to get it passed. The issue is that if tenants want to come forward and, as Jeanette said, take a look at their rent history, they're prohibited from doing that. The legislation we're trying to repeal was passed in 2015, I think. And since 2003, at least 160,000 apartments have been taken out of rent stabilization using a combination of tactics. And what we're trying to do is give tenants an opportunity to reclaim that affordable housing. The mayor has an initiative to build affordable housing and to preserve it, but we are really interested in helping support tenants in their efforts to reclaim it. It's kind of like bringing back the seashore, if you will. So we really love your approval on this. The idea came from the notion that Gail Brewer had suggested that would stand for tenant safety, that if all the community boards got together and did a resolution in support of important legislation that's being passed in city council, in this case, in Albany, that it would send a message that we really care about this. And hopefully we'll take a leadership position on this, and then the other community boards in Manhattan and perhaps the other boroughs will go ahead and do a similar thing. The resolution is pretty comprehensive. We also have a bill we can show you. We really, really appreciate your support of this. The Housing Committee is taking a very serious look at affordable housing.
Yes, Mark.
So as I read your resolution, I just want to confirm that the 4-year look back precludes two things. It precludes the tenant from recovering overcharges in rent, but it also precludes the tenant from claiming that the space should be re-regulated if the landlord is successful in concealing or avoiding capture for 4 years. So it's not just putting money in the tenant's pockets, although don't get me wrong, that's good enough for me. It's also that they can re-regulate the apartment for going forward for that tenant and other tenants. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's why we're saying this is reclaiming affordable units, not just saving.
Yeah, it's really important.
There are two components to a rent overcharge application. One is what the rent level should be, and the other one is the rent status, whether it's regulated or unregulated. And it's really important to clarify here that, you know, a tenant is not rent regulated, the apartment is. So if somebody moves out and the apartment's been returned to rent regulation, then the next tenant, depending what's been done to the apartment, you know, may also, move into a rent regulated apartment.
Okay, so from what I've read, and I only know about it through reading this tonight, other than incidentally, I think this is a good thing, we should vote for it. However, it's very troubling to me when, and this is not the first time, this happens from time to time, when we're asked to vote specifically to support a particular legislative proposal, whether it's in the city council or in the legislature, and it hasn't been distributed to us tonight or in advance to review. This is a pretty technical one, I think, and I'm not sure how many people would, but some of us would. So it's, I just think our CB7 procedure ought to be, and supposedly is.
Well,
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was in the board package.
It wasn't,
it should be in the board
then I
package.
stand corrected, I don't remember.
Because we recommended
seeing
that,
it.
so.
At the steering committee, we discussed it, and everybody said, make sure to attach the resolution, the bill to it. But I hear you.
Call the
You want to
question.
call the question?
Wait.
Jeanette, Susan, I want to know how you're going to give this information to the other community boards so they can get on board. I agree with you that they should be a united effort.
Actually, we've had a number of housing committees from other community boards contact us. They really like the idea that we're focusing on affordable housing. And I was just in conversation recently, I believe it was with the housing chairperson of community board 5.
Jeanette, actually, what we'll do is we will send it to the borough president and to the chairs of each of the 12 of the other 11 community boards and ask them to send it to all of the, to share it with their committees. And then the borough president can share it with the other borough presidents.
And actually what we discussed was that maybe the borough president would be happy in convening a special borough board meeting with all the housing chairs of the community boards.
That'd be great if you could follow up with that, because I think she would do that, Jeanette.
And then also in terms of the housing workshop that Roberta mentioned, we've been reaching out to the other community boards already and, reaching out to the housing representatives. Corey, back to your question, I want to let you know that part of the reason to pick out this particular legislation is that Linda and other members of the Assembly and Senate have been working on this, been beavering away in a frustrated fashion for 7 or 8 years. So it's really been kicking around for a long time. That's why I think it's a good kickstart.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that.
All right, so we call the question.
In item number 6, where it mentions assembly members in support of that, you've got Inez Barron, she's a city council member, husband. Charles Barron is the assembly member, I believe.
All right,
And it's 2 R's, not 1 R.
okay, we'll correct that. All right, the question is called.
Okay, all those in favor?
This is number 3, right?
Number 3, yes.
Voting for affordable housing.
That's 35. Anybody opposed? None. Anybody abstaining? One. Nobody. Okay, so the vote passes 35-0-10.
We are now going back to the first item on the agenda, which is housing. And I turn this over to our land use. I turn this over to our two co-chairs.
Outside of the three, yes?
Yes, number
Thank
3.
you.
No, I need all the reinforcements I can get.
Okay, so tonight, I don't know how many of you were here at our land use meeting this month, but we had a great turnout, and I want to thank the board for other non-land use members for turning out for a presentation that we had from George James, organized by Afro Sheffer, to help us understand a lot of the super tall buildings and how they grew and how they walked into our neighborhood, so to speak. As a result of that meeting, we decided, for those of you in the public who may or may not have been here, to write a letter to the chair of the Board of Standards and Appeals to inform them of our opinions as to the appropriateness of the super talls, dealing generically, not with any specific problem, but voicing our concern about overly tall buildings that are not in context. The second piece of work was a resolution really dealing with something that many of the nonprofits around the city are dealing with locally. Our Committee for Environmentally Sound Development, Landmark West, members of our board have been sort of challenging and pushing very quietly for some major reform because of the building at 200 Amsterdam. And that's a resolution directed specifically towards that project. Obviously, it has unique characteristics and issues because of the way the lot was configured that allowed that building to be built so tall. So one of the issues that we learned that night was that we have not only the super tall, and that building, as I understand it now, is not necessarily super tall, it's just very tall, and it's very tall because of the gerrymandered lot of using pathways, parking lots, and various other pieces of open space, which it may not be entitled to. So the reason why this is important is that it's sending the message to all the electeds, and I need to thank the Borough President's Office for hosting our meetings with the committee chairs and other interested nonprofits, as well as Helen Rosenthal's office, who's been shouldering some of the day-to-day meetings, as well as our chair, Roberta, who is on land use overload, for sure. So with that in mind, I believe in the packet, you have there's the resolution. I'm going to turn this over to Richard, because luckily I'm using my voice, and you don't need to hear it anymore. But there's the resolution and then a letter.
On your resolution sheet, there is a copy of the letter that we proposed as of last week. It refers to a Department of Buildings bulletin, which we feel is favorable on the 200 Amsterdam Avenue site. And today, I got a hold of that bulletin, or yesterday, and amended the letter to be a little bit more specific about what the bulletin says. So the double-spaced page that comes with your resolutions is what we're voting on, not the single-spaced resolution on the resolution sheet. Before we vote, we have some speakers. Chris Giordano.
Sure. So on the letter, we're not voting.
We are going to vote on the letter, but we're voting on the letter that's a loose letter.
The loose letter,
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chris Giordano. I live at West 65th Street. I'm also a member of the 65th and 66th Streets Block Association. we want to express our appreciation to Chair Seymour and to land use co-chairs Ash and Callie for these resolutions addressing this out of context development. We also want to point out that we believe there should be a public comment process, which we believe is required according to the Lincoln Square Special District zoning resolution that requires justification of proposed developments. We're also wanting to acknowledge our happiness that the elected officials are speaking out against these issues with voids and mechanicals and floor heights that are creating these out of context buildings. And we ask that you continue to help us to find solutions, and we appreciate your support again.
Thank you. Sheila Kendrick.
I guess I just have to repeat what Chris said, because I very much support everything he said. Mostly thank you to land use and Roberta and all of you. I'm with 10 West 66th Street, who's next door to a mega giant tower about to go in, but also with Save Central Park NYC. And I think as we look at all these super dolls that are going up and all the properties that are vulnerable because they're religious institutions or for whatever other reason, that we really are losing a lot of Central Park to shadows. And as you look at Central Park South, the western corner, it really has that part of the park in darkness for a good part of the day. So I thank you in looking at the park and taking care of the park for all the children who need it for generations to come.
Just interrupt for a second for a commercial.
Most importantly, on my way in, Diana Howard from the Borough President's Office and Helen Rosenthal's office has announced that specifically relating to 200 Amsterdam, that there will be a meeting at the Lincoln Square Synagogue on March 19th at 4 p.m. And this will be to discuss the legal cases, the challenges that have been presented, as well as next steps for controlling or preventing or voicing our opinion. So I encourage everybody in this room, bring a friend or two and join in. Sorry, that was very important, so that's why
Olive Floyd.
Yes, I'm the president of the Committee for Environmentally Sound Development and my organization that stood up and we challenged the Department of Buildings.
And after the challenge, we had to take out an appeal from the Board of Standards and Appeal. It's been a long, arduous task. I must say the elected officials in our organization, in our community, stood up with us. I'm very grateful to them, and I am very grateful to whoever wrote this resolution. You really hit all the points, and you made it, I'm sure that everybody in this room understands what's going on. The precedent is being set there. The two important things that I want to say is that we would like you to come to this meeting that the borough president has had for the 19th, and even more important, and I'm giving out flyers for this, is that on March 27th, there is a hearing that we can all talk at the Board of Standards and Appeal, and please come. We'll have our lawyer there, and he's going to explain everything, but I want people who live here to come and spill out their hearts for what's happening to our neighborhood and what's coming up further.
Thank you, Olive, and thank you for the very hard work. Susan Simon. Don't be sorry. We like it when people say okay, most people. William Grant.
Just to reiterate what all said, and thank you very much to the Land Use Committee and our elected officials for being strong on this issue. And the meeting itself is at Tuesday, March 2017 at 10 a.m., the 10 a.m. session, Inspector Hall, 22 Reed Street, Borough of Manhattan. You can come and talk about the come and talk about the super talks. The reason what they're doing is that the Department of Buildings is kind of, I might disagree with you, Paige, on one small note, where their mandate is not to legislate. That's not what they're supposed to do. But essentially, through a series of very poor decisions, they've essentially replaced their opinion with what the zoning resolution does say. And one of these things is the gerrymandered zoning lots. Another one is mechanical voids. And I'm told by Helen Rosenthal's office that's something that's going to be addressed rather shortly. We're very happy about that. But we're not opposing these buildings just because they happen to be tall. We're opposing them because of the kind of manipulation of the zoning lots that allows them to be possible. So we really appreciate this community board, and especially the Land Use Committee, and all your hard work, and very pleased to be part of a committee, that community that's done such good work on this issue. Thank you.
22 Reed Street.
22 Reed Street, Reed with an E.
That's in Dwayne Reed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have plenty of flyers if anybody wants.
Why don't you just, call them, maybe just leave them on the desk and people can pick them up on the way out. I can't read is it Josh Pennington?
Thank you. So not a popular opinion, but I actually support the tall buildings. I think this resolution is short-sighted and it fails to take into account the way that building height interacts with density and affordability. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. Housing prices here are out of control. I know that a lot of people look at these tall buildings, they think they're not for us, that they're super rich people, no one's even gonna live there. The fact is, I used to live at 53 West 71st Street. It was a 5-unit brownstone. That brownstone was bought up by one of these rich people and converted into a single-family house. Now, when we fail to allow tall buildings and we fail to allow luxury apartments, that knock-on effect is felt down by everyone in the neighborhood. We need more housing. We need more luxury housing. We need more middle-income housing. We need more low-income housing. We need more housing at every part of the income spectrum. This focus on aesthetics and on building heights and on technicalities overlooks the fact that there are tens of thousands of people who are homeless and there are thousands of people who can't afford to stay in their current homes. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to correct something the last speaker said, our resolution addresses the issue of density and affordability and housing in the following way. What we're saying is that these buildings are too tall because they have a lot of empty space and high ceiling heights. High ceiling heights does not increase the availability of housing or affordable housing or anything like that. And these voids might be acceptable to the homeless, but to no one who wants to live in a home because they're open to the air. So we specifically take into account the need for housing and say that these too tall buildings don't address it in any way.
At this point, how do you define super tall?
Well, you know.
Well, actually, there is a definition. Supposedly, these are not quite super tall, but they're, Clary, what was the word?
When you see it, you know.
No, in all seriousness.
Yeah, Clary, what was your word?
You want to know why the definition came about?
No. We're being asked to vote on a resolution with a word. I'm trying to explain my point with a word that I don't know what it means.
For purposes of this resolution, the page doesn't give you a real definition. But my guidepost was that we oppose devices that are used to get around the buildings, the zoning resolution, in order to build buildings that are much too tall for either the neighborhood or for the number of apartments they contain. So in my mind, it was not an official designation, and there are people who might take issue with one or the other, but that's where it comes from.
But I just have a question on that. If they violate the zoning law, how can they possibly? When you said get around, I don't know. I don't understand.
Wait, let's
satisfy the super tall issue. The reason how that came about, we have tall buildings, we have skyscrapers, and we have now super talls. Super talls was an expression coined because it reflects the technology that is now available that wasn't available when the Empire State Building or Rockefeller Center or our skyline on Central Park West wasn't available. Those are load-bearing steel framed walls. Then you introduce concrete with a composite floor. Now we have high-strength concrete that can be pumped 700 feet in the air. You notice the derricks and cranes now, I don't know if you've ever seen them jump a building, but there's different rigging for these types of buildings that allow them to fast-track construction. So by the time they hit 700 feet, the first floor is probably already leased. So the super talls refers to this composite construction method that allows these very super tall buildings.
Why is the construction method an issue? 700 feet
No,
is smaller than the Empire.
It's an issue. You're confusing two things. This is a definition, just like saying a federal Greek revival courthouse. This is distinct from any other type of skyscraper. It's called super tall. So for tonight's purposes, I will send you what the DOB is now calling this. But for tonight's discussion, it's an excessively tall building that is essentially, as per our review and those committee members who attended land use and other people in the city, out of context with its immediate neighbors. Okay?
Can I ask a correction?
Yeah,
I would just like to add and perhaps correct a couple of things. The term super tall, while I don't know its exact origin, is a descriptive and often pejorative polemical word that has been given to describe initially a handful of buildings that have been built on 57th Street, which are roughly, I'm generalizing, in the 1,000-foot, 900,000-foot realm. Okay, there are 3 or 4 reasons for this. I'll say them very quickly because that's what's part of what we were able to hear from George James, who when he came to the committee. But there are about 3 elements that encourage this. One is exactly what Paige said about the nature of the new architecture that can permit it to go very, very high. 2 is that what Richard was referring to as the voids, in part relates to the fact that the first often 150 feet or so, unlike the way most buildings, not all, but the way most buildings are built, are basically without apartments, often house the mechanicals. Usually in New York, you know, mechanicals are on the top, and there are huge mechanicals, and they go into this void, allowing, therefore, mechanicals to be there, and secondly, the apartments to start at 200 feet or 300 feet more and keep going up, and interspersed as you take a look, when you look at 432 Park, which you can see all over, there's, you know, it's tall and thin, and then there are from far away sort of these, you don't see windows, but really there's spaces where they actually have greenery, or there may be means to combat the effect of wind, or even sometimes spaces for the apartment dwellers to have a good time, you know, socially. The last reason, not the only one, but the third one, Richard referenced, not in every building, but there is no regulation of maximums of floor-to-floor heights in apartments in New York. And you know the convention is, if you think of it, most are, I don't know, 10 feet or 9 feet or 11 feet, so on. And if you think of the floor heights of 20 feet, you think of a school, let's say, or a ballroom or whatever. Many of these apartments, not all of them, also go to
enormously high floor-to-floor heights. So these technical reasons and architectural ingenuity, and above all, the market for the luxury has encouraged many of these buildings, and probably is encouraging others. The last effect in many of them, you could take a look at the buildings, the last thing has to do often with the streetscape, because if you've got these voids, right, that there's often not what you think about of, a lobby or stores or whatever, but the building, you can see, goes up and the apartments go up further, and so the effect on the street is perhaps not desirable.
I just want to, the purpose, or at least our committee's purpose in drafting this resolution, was to get the attention of city planning and others to look at the zoning resolution with a view to pointing to, with a view to identifying areas where the zoning resolution can be strengthened to address issues where there is height but no density, really is what we're talking about, or where there is a gerrymandering of zoning lots, as with 200 Amsterdam Avenue. So although Paige has a technical definition of too tall, I don't. And it wasn't really addressed to any specific building. It was addressed to the devices that have been used to increase the heights of these buildings. And we can debate building by building whether something is too tall or super tall or mega tall or just tall. Any other questions? Peter?
As an architect, I'm sorry, as an architect, I'm probably blasphemous in what I'm saying here, but I think it's high time that city planning deal with bulk of these buildings, which they do in certain zoning areas on lower buildings, but to simply be able to build a tall building with floors that could be, let's say, 100 feet high, to use an extreme, is outlandish. It makes no sense. And there has to be the beginning of some regulation of both of these buildings that go up and up and up. And square footage alone should not be the deciding factor.
This was very briefly touched by one or two speakers at the land use committee meeting a few weeks ago. There are devices that are used throughout much of the Upper West Side that limit height to the contextual districts. We still have a lot of portions of the Upper West Side, not necessarily the parts that are in the Lincoln Square district, but certainly up through much of the rest of the district that are still height factor districts. I don't understand why there's still height factor districts. I'll never understand why there's still height factor districts. It's a little too technical. Height factor districts, if you had a big enough lot, you could build to the moon. And that's the way they're written. And we're not talking about those districts. Another thing on 200 Amsterdam, I've been doing zoning studies for, I'll just quick on ahead, over 30 years. And I have to give them credit for having the nerve to separate zoning lots from tax lots and area from splitting tax lots, and that's mentioned here. And if you ever do see this on a map, it is rather bizarre and interesting. But this isn't the first building that has been done under this. There are a couple of other buildings that are there, that are built and are occupied under the zoning lots. I just want to mention that. And how does that get addressed? And then the other thing, I'm jumping ahead. Can I jump ahead one here, or should I do that later? What? I'm sorry?
You want to talk about the resolution?
Yeah, there's two resolutions here, so.
Yeah, you can talk about it.
Okay, the other one is on amending the second resolution, development rights transferred over long distance under rules of governing the last bullet. This one actually concerns me because the way a lot of these guys think, they'll say, okay, I can't take my inclusionary bonus over here, so I'm just gonna bring it here and build a bigger building yet again here. They're not gonna drop, it makes more sense for them to build that, right where it is, if that's where they have to build it. So I think we have to find a more nuanced way of working that, so we still get the affordable. We're gonna get the affordable housing any which way, but it's not gonna necessarily work the way we want it to work, the way it's written, because if you have to build a 15-foot ceiling, you're gonna build the affordables 15, you're gonna build the market rate 15, because as you all know, there's a lot of money in this for them. So once again, I like to go back to the idea of absolute heights. Rather than giving the $1,500 an hour lawyers more opportunity to come with more ideas.
I just want to say there's nothing wrong with $1,500 an hour. And by the way, on the issue of heights, we have raised it with the borough president. We have met significant headwinds from city planning in the city. They are not in favor of height limitations. We'll find out why, and maybe we'll figure out a way to finesse the issue, but it's going to be an issue.
I just wanted to say before Mark speaks, I'm waiting for the $1,500 an hour architecture fee.
Well, we have the architects.
That's right. Fine.
By the way, I just got word that Peter's been drummed out of the AIA.
People, I lowered the sound on the mics because they were too loud, so be sure to hold it close to your mouth.
Okay, so thank you for, so I'm going to comment on the letter. I fully support the resolution, have nothing to add to it. It expresses exactly what it should, and compliments to the committee and those involved, because that presentation by George James was fabulous. If you see these voids and crazy devices that folks are using, clearly as manipulations, it really gets one's blood boiling. I have one technical point on the letter, and I apologize that I read it too quickly when it was circulated before, because I was focusing on the conclusion part of it, which is perfect. But there is a sentence in there that begins, "It is beyond the mandate of CB7 to address the technical issues." There will come a day, I'm certain, that we will want to address technical issues exactly like this, so I would prefer we not say that. I would prefer we say something like, we defer to the parties on this particular application. I have some language if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
I think that the most powerful aspect of this is that it's designed, the second resolution, to address the city planning commission and zoning resolution. Without those changes, we can see everything wrong, complain about it, and be right, and not have any action. The 5 tactics that are outlined here summarize the concerns of the community and experts. And I think we should take it even a little further, that it doesn't have to be specifically in a resolution, but we bring this to borough board and then to borough boards, so it becomes a citywide movement.
That is definitely, I think I put the sound down too low. That is definitely part of the plan. Dale's office has, Borough President Dale Brewer's office has been working on this, and we will bring it to the borough board. I have been discussing super talls at the borough board since I became chair. We will also bring the letter on housing to the borough board. And we do discuss these.
The sentence that Mark pointed out is now reads, "This letter will not address the technical issues before you, which are being fully aired by the party."
Brilliant, thank you. Better than what I read.
Any other? Yes.
Okay. I just want to say that I think
that this is a very, very good start. But one of the real problems that happens is that so many of these buildings, very oddly, are as of right. Because they are as of right, they don't come before us. And so technically it's even difficult for us to address them. And so one of the things that I'm very concerned about, that I think
is possible, is to try and do, instead of an absolute height limit, but to try and do above a certain height, that you would have a special permit. Special permits would involve us, it would involve the borough president, the borough boards, it would all have to be voted on, it would not be as of right, the whole community would be involved. And I think that's a really important thing that we should start looking at.
What we didn't do was propose specific changes, you know, in the zoning resolution. What we're trying to do is get a hearing.
We can bring this to
But
the
your point
attention.
is very well taken. Any other questions, comments? All those, let's do it, anybody want to not bundle?
Let's bundle.
Yes, I want to not bundle, please.
Oh, okay.
For the letter first. I think the letter.
The letter
Number one regarding, 200.
Okay, voting on the letter, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 33. All those against? 1, 2. Abstaining? I'm not eligible to vote. So the vote passes 33-200.
Okay, and next is the resolution, which is number 2 on your sheet. All those in favor?
So all those in favor for the number 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Against? 1. Abstaining? 1. So the vote passes 33-110.
You know, I want to thank not just the committee, but at our committee meeting, we had maybe a dozen non-committee board members, which we're very grateful for, and particularly Clary's input. It was a good meeting, I thought, and it was a credit to all of you all. Thank you.
And I want to thank the public for coming out, both 2 weeks ago and this week. Thank you all so much. People, the meeting is not ended. We are about to go into the Transportation Committee presentation on the
Enhanced station
on the Enhanced Station Initiative by the MTA. We're just getting set up for that, so bear with me. This is
Okay.
Okay, people, I think we're ready.
Thank you. So this is a presentation that Transit gave at the last Transportation Committee meeting. And it involves the 72nd, 86th, and 110th B and C line stations. It also involved 163rd Street in Amsterdam on the C line, but that is not in our district, so.
You have to hold the mic closer to the mouth.
Okay, well, these are the 3 stations that are involved in this program. Typically, these stations get closed for 5 to 6 months while this work is going on. In the case of 110th Street, which has side-by-side platforms, as opposed to 72nd and 86, which have platforms on top of each other, they may in fact close one side at a time and not totally close that station. We won't get into 163rd Street. The kind of work that's done in these stations is not just cosmetic, as some people have said. There are platform edge restorations, there are ADA strip restorations, there are replacement of stair treads that are worn out. In some cases, and I don't believe in any of these, but in some cases they're widening stairways. In some rare cases, they're actually putting in elevators. Westchester Square on the 6th line is one of those. There has to be room for it, and these stations.
Keep your mic higher up.
Yes, these stations actually are adjacent to co-ops and condos on Central Park West, so elevator installation is different. One of the good things is that the new transit president, Andy Weinberg, has said he's looking into new types of elevators that may be put into stations, which take up less of a footprint. And he is actually looking to make every station ADA accessible. Of course, that's an unbelievable cost, but he's looking into that. So, Jerry, go back one. Yes, these are the kinds of things. Water infiltration has been a real problem in some stations, causing flooding and rats and what have you. They're going to do water remediation in these stations. They're going to do painting. They're going to install countdown clocks at several places along the platforms, as well as at street level, so you will know before you go down when the next train is coming, as is now on the Broadway line and some Lexington stations. They're going to replace handrails. The lighting is going to be a lot better. If you've seen any of the new stations on the 4th Avenue line, 53rd Street, Bay Ridge Avenue, Union Street, all on the 4th Avenue R line in Brooklyn, you can have an idea of what these are like. They're also working on the Astoria branch right now. There will be obviously health points all throughout the station. There will be increased Wi-Fi, increased signage. Keep going, Jerry. This is an approximate timetable. 110th is the first one that will be closed. A month later, 72nd Street, followed by 86th Street. They can take 6 months, but I have a feeling that because of the way these stations are, they're not in the most decrepit shape like some other stations are. They might not take as long as 6 months. My big question for transit when they came, and I've learned some stuff since then, which is, what will you do with the displaced passengers? Will you do extra service in places? We are now told that there will be extra M10 bus service. I asked, if somebody now takes a subway to a bus and they have to get on a bus first, will they have to pay an extra fare for that third trip? And you will not. They will have a 3-legged transfer if you currently take a subway to a bus. I asked if there will be extra service on the Broadway subway, because that is obviously where many people will walk to, unless you're close to 81st Street and you can walk to either way from there. And they are looking into that, but there's no definite agreement that they will do that yet. And it's pretty clear that the Broadway 1, 2, and 3 will take some hit from this additional riding. They will, in this slide refers to what are called GOs, general orders, which are weekend diversions. Prior to this work, there will be several weekend diversions where the uptown local trains will run express to 125th, as has been done many other weekends, and you have to ride south to get to your station. That is in preparation for this work. And now here's a view of what the street level entrance looks like, and what it will look like when it has received the enhanced staging treatment. You will see countdown clocks right at the street. You will see connecting bus lines, how far the next bus is from where you are right then.
That's great.
And yeah, those things are great. This is the park side of 110th. That's what it will look like. And the green bar on top illustrates that it's a 24-hour entrance, like the globes of the olds used to do. That's an existing entrance. And as you see, it's an adjacent to a building. Existing lighting on mezzanines. what the new lighting will look like with maps, including bus and neighborhood maps, existing side-by-side platform, with new lighting and some artwork in it. What these slides are not showing you is the repair to platform edges and stairways.
Looks real nice.
And tile work. Well, this is under a scaffold right now, but
What time we go?
present entrance. Proposed entrance with new lighting, maps. They're also doing away with the kind of banks of turnstiles we have now, putting in new kinds, much easier to get through.
You jump over them?
Big screen.
You're athletic.
They're lowering them, so it makes it easier to jump over.
Second Street. Now these, go back, Jerry, one. These, not the one with the ad on it. This, we're not sure that will fly, because you may recall that many of our Central Park West stations had ads on them, and there were complaints about those because it's a historic street and what have you, and they removed the ads. So we will have to speak to them about these kinds of digital ads. They're moving towards digital ads. They have a big contract with Outfront Advertising, and every ad in the stations and in the trains themselves is becoming digital. In return, 20% of all the spaces will be for service-related items, but you'll never be able to not have a digital ad in your face. So whether we need them on a historic street such as Central Park West is something we will definitely have to talk to them about. Existing area, proposed new look. That's actually not a big change, but you can see all restored ADA platform edge barriers, and for the visually challenged, new lighting, obviously, new art, new signage. There's new benches, but the benches are nothing to rave about. This is basically the presentation we received. We are endeavoring, as you heard from Roberta, to get the same people and some others to come out to a big community meeting, because not everybody knows this is coming. And while the MTA typically wraps stations with big signs about this program is coming and the proposed dates, they have not yet done so. You know, I'm just reporting this. I'm not speaking for them. Rich?
So I blame myself and others, but we were derelict at the wheel at committee, and I think we need to rectify that now. This was presented to us by the MTA as a fait accompli. And yeah, since then, Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal called on the MTA to halt its plans until there's a public hearing. Danny O'Donnell tweeted out saying, purely aesthetic modifications are taking precedent over structural repairs and ADA compliance is an outrage. We need dedicated funding for infrastructure, condemning this. I think we need to discuss this. We need public hearings, and this is a massive amount of money. I think it was close to $100,000. I'm sorry, 100 million. $100. No, $100 million that could be used for structural repairs that could improve service. Also, the idea that this is being flung upon us with almost no notice to the community when we ask basic questions such as, are you going to have buses replacing this, or what are you doing for other subway lines to make up for the loss of service? They didn't have any good ideas. They hadn't done any studies. And I think we need to, as a board, back up what Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal said, which is that we need to slow this down. We need hearings, and the idea that they're going to be shutting some of our vital subway stops without any public discussion, any public notice, and without consulting with either the board or the public is an outrage. And I think we need a resolution from the full board tonight, calling on them to halt until we can have a better sense of what this will be.
Right, they're on the wrong track.
Did you want to say something?
Can have it then. Only just go around.
We'll go around. I'll get to you in a minute.
I have one question and then one comment. Are they getting rid of the benches?
No, they're adding benches.
They're going to add these standing benches?
Leaning benches.
Leaning benches, okay. I think this falls under the category of lipstick on the pig. That they're spending all this money when they can't make the trains run on time. We have switching systems from the Roosevelt administration.
The first
And
Roosevelt.
the second Roosevelt administration.
Which Roosevelt?
And this is what they choose to spend $110 million. And I understand this is probably a battle between Cuomo and de Blasio, and this is Cuomo's bidding that they're doing, but I think it's outrageous, and I agree with Rich that we should be delaying this until the community can weigh in.
I just wanted to add, we're supposed to be representing the community, and not only, aside from the money, there's going to be incredible inconvenience for so many people, most of whom don't even know it's going to happen. And after these several months of inconvenience, they're going to go back down to the station, made look nicer, but the service will be just as bad. If you're going to shut down the station for 6 months, at least give them something, some improvement in service to warrant that. So I just wanted to add that.
I just wanted to add, I'm back on the board after taking a 3-month leave. This is the first committee meeting that I attended. And while I agree with the last 3 comments, I also think we need to be realistic about what the MTA is trying to do. And I think that they have proposed something. I think we can maybe add some things to this resolution that demand a few additional things that we've been talking about.
There isn't a resolution.
Or whatever we're talking about tonight with this. I know we have other resolutions. We are doing a town hall meeting. We are planning to do that next week. I do not think the purpose of that meeting will be necessarily to discuss, the use of the money, but to inform the public. And I think as a board, we have a responsibility to inform the public that these things are happening, and we are doing that, and that's what's going to happen next week. So I just want to add that as not to defend the MTA. I think we're all in agreement that we don't, we would much rather have improved service over these cosmetic improvements. But if we can't change what the money is being allocated to, the best we can do as a board is to make sure that the public is notified, and that clearly has not happened, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we do that.
Has the MTA committed to showing up next week?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to obviously recuse on this because of the position I hold, but I don't want people to be confused that if we didn't do this, the subway service would get better. These are totally different funds. These aren't even the funds that are the major station rehabilitation funds. Those are the $2.5 billion enhanced station initiative. Station rehabilitation program. This is the enhanced station initiative. The entire program is is about $200 million. So these 3.
Why is the money different, and why can't it be
It's different. It's the what the state guarantees to the MTA for a particular purpose. The subway action plan.
Can that be changed?
The subway action plan, which is $839 million plan. I mean, you can laugh, Howard, but that's the way it is.
Anything can be changed. What would it take to change it?
The subway action plan has been funded by the state. It has not been funded by the city. Many folks are trying to get the mayor to commit. It is not in the state. It is not in the city's budget thus far. And so the subway action plan is getting slowed down and will be stretched out unless the city comes up with their half of the $839 million. That has nothing to do with this enhanced station initiative. I see nothing wrong with making the wait area nicer, better for ADA, better lighting, better signage. It does not affect whether they're going to improve your service. That is a totally different amount of funding. Different source of funding even.
Good evening, everybody. I kind of agree with Andrew. I mean, three stations are going to be upgraded. In 5 to 6 months, it'll probably be done less than 6 months. It's not going to inconvenience a whole lot of people. I saw in the papers a few weeks ago where they talked about they were going to upgrade it. If you didn't read the paper, they had a big article in this that they were going to upgrade. Now, I've been very fortunate, and I like the lighting. I think it needs to be done because some of those stations are dark and dreary down there. And I've been very fortunate. I was over in Madrid, Spain. The same article, the same on 110th below where they had the lighted screens, they already have it there. I mean, very bright, very convenient. You can see it's not dark and it's not dingy. So I think it's a good thing. Now, you may disagree with the amount of money that they're spending, but I think it's a very good investment for the Upper West Side. Okay, and they're going to provide you with transportation. I remember seeing that, so I'm all for it.
Anything else?
This is a little bit like the last resolution. The community board. It's a little bit like the last resolution on Two Talls, in the sense that it's the community board seeing an issue and calling it to the city's attention, or in this case, the MTA. It may be that the train, no pun intended, the train's already left the station, although I doubt it. But this particular project, I don't see a harm in having a resolution that says, number one, there should be public hearings, as the legislature said. Number two, we favor marshaling the first dollars that come out of the city or state toward improving service, and thereafter addressing station dinginess. So it's not like we can, Andrew's probably right, it's not going to affect this program. The other thing about notice, by the way, Andrew, and I say this out of ignorance, I assume that weeks in advance, the MTA is going to post notices all over the state.
3 weeks, you guys, like our board has to.
Well, right, it should be done now for the first state.
That's the reason we care about this.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I think the board needs to take a stand and at least, I mean, I came up on the train tonight and very few people had any knowledge that this was happening. And I know we're a group here that gets our board notices and everything else, but the majority of the people who are going to be affected by this, and it's not just neighbors, it's people who work in the neighborhood too, who are going to be disaffected by this. And I think at a minimum, the board has a responsibility to try to get the word out. That's the point of trying to do this town hall, and get the word out, in addition to just showing the PowerPoint tonight.
Then we have one public station.
I don't know, Elizabeth, how it is that you know what people don't know as you took your ride up here. I really don't understand how you could possibly know what people know there unless you were there with a survey. You've just made an assertion. Secondly, I do agree that this can be a good thing. We all would like to see enhanced stations for all the obvious reasons. But what also has been happening, and on the 1, 2, 3 line is elsewhere, and I've also had occasion to try to get from the Upper West Side to the Bronx several times on weekends, which took, 2 hours with incoherent signs, incorrect and inadequate buses. The people further north suffering every weekend, and then in order for me to get home, an MTA person actually told me that the way I should get from 145th Street, though I was at 242nd, I should really go, when I want to get to 96 and switch to the edge, said, why don't you go to 59th Street on the 1 and then come uptown, and gave me some incoherent thing. So all I'm saying, we all have anecdotes. I agree that we need the meeting. I think it's taking them a long time to have the meeting. You could say, well, okay, now's the time. We should set the agenda for the meeting. We should also, they should tell us what's happening, and we should have the right to also ask about the money, where it's coming from, and what's going on here, and then do what Richard just suggested, and strongly here tonight, to have a resolution about the need for, in the capital funding, to speed up and target, this could take years, the fixing of the signals, the tracks and so on of our 100-year-old state, our 100-year-old system. We can have gorgeous stations. Who would be against it? And it's still going to be crummy in the next 5 years because they are not offering enough targeted capital money or raising enough money to do what is necessary, unlike other cities of the world. And we
should be holding their feet to the fire, even though we're the little community board who uses the trains.
Andrew, maybe you could take that up, that transportation come to the, I'm suggesting that Andrew, that.
It's a yeah, I have a resolution which I'm ready to read.
I have a question. How many people here know what this meeting is next week? Nobody. So let's find out, at least us tonight, if something's taking place. How can we tell anybody if we don't know what it is?
It's an election official in the room.
Wait, let's deal with the resolution first, then we'll come back to that.
Yeah, a few people had their hand up. Once I call the resolution, there's no more discussion. So did you want me to read the resolution, or do you want to?
Yes, we can discuss this after.
Okay, so I'd like to propose a resolution. The planned work being done to the BC lines was foisted on the Upper West Drive with no notice, no public hearings, nor studies about alternate arrangements for impacted passengers. Our subway system is literally falling apart, and spending over $110 million on enhancements that don't improve underlying service without engaging the public is unacceptable. We call on the MTA to put these plans on hold until there are public hearings and studies about the impacts on the community and a discussion of the best use of this funding. Does anyone second?
I second.
We have a public speaker who has not been called on, so we're gonna call on the public speaker and then there'll be more discussion. This is Dan Cohn.
Hi there again. I wear a few hats, and the other hat I wear is I'm the head of the Valley Restoration Local Development Corporation, which is a community organization, 40 years old now, that advocates for the economic development, transportation, housing needs of Manhattan Valley, which runs roughly from 100th Street to 110th, basically east of Broadway over to Central Park West. The 2 and 3 line, the 1, 2, and 3 line at 59th Street, at 72nd Street, at 96th Street, and 125th Street is fully ADA accessible. Most of the time, those elevators work. There is no ADA accessible, there is no elevator between 59th and 125th Street on the BC line on Central Park West. And the fact that we're going to spend $100 million and put in cosmetic repairs, and some of them which were necessary, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't say cosmetic, but necessary repairs, and not include one of those stations to become an elevator is kind of ridiculous. And I mean, at some point, Andrew, you even mentioned that they're going to be ADA compliant or they're going to be ADA services, but if you can't get into the station because they're not wheelchair accessible, who are we making them ADA compliant for? I mean, visually, okay, so there's visual impairment, but still, we're talking about a significant population that's denied service because of no elevator service on that. Now, of course, in my vested interest, and I'll speak subjectively, I think 110th Street would be a place where you could put an elevator, particularly because there's multiple entrances and there's a wide, very wide sidewalk in front of Towers of the Park, which would provide for excavation and installation of an elevator. But somewhere, one of those stations, let's take some of that $110 million, and I spoke with Mark about this earlier, that there are different pockets of money, and you can't necessarily take money out for one thing and put it in for another. But it really does seem kind of ridiculous if you're going to take all this time to make all these changes, that at least get an elevator out of it, so some people feel like the inconvenience was meant something.
For $110 million, you can't afford an elevator. That would cost extra.
Discussion on the resolution.
Roberta, can we just get the resolution this way?
Can you email it?
Yeah, I'm writing it up right now. Who was that who wanted it?
It was an email of the resolution.
Thanks. I will support the resolution, although I think it should include the potential for phasing of this, because the overlapping of the closure of several stations at once, even though it appears that they are staggering them, it still is going to add to the inconvenience of the folks who are going to be affected. I think it's good that we call on the MTA to rethink some of this, although I agree that it probably won't make a difference. But I wanted to raise one other concept, which is in the discussion, and I apologize, I'm not sure who said it, but I heard discussion about how this is in part the dialogue between the mayor and the governor, and how there are different visions for funding the essential track work and signal work that is what's at the heart of the bad service, as I understand it. I'm speaking as somebody who was stuck between stations tonight en route, which is why I was late. So that is, and I'm going to put my budget committee hat on for a second and say that maybe it's time for this board to consider in its budget priorities for next year, which in turn, of course, is the year after that in terms of the actual budget, to think about a budget priority that calls on the mayor and the city to do its share, or a share of this additional capital funding that's necessary in order to put the money into the correct budget hopper that would actually create better service. That's my idea.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll go across.
I think there's a lot of valid points everybody's been making, but I also get the sense that when the MTA is looking to put $100 million into upgrades that I think most people agree with, perhaps people think that some of the other upgrades like elevators and other station work are needed, are all important, but I do think that $100 million station upgrades is critically important. And I don't think just a resolution from a community board is necessarily going to change the direction or the money from the MTA and where it's going to be allocated. And I think we should be advocating to get these upgrades, which would not stop us from asking for additional structural upgrades and elevators that we need, but we need to get out there and let people know that their schedules, how they get to work and how they get home is going to change, and they need to be aware of that much sooner than later.
I just have a question, maybe Andrew, you can answer this. If we pass the resolution, do we risk losing these funds?
No, it's not really out.
But we risk losing the meeting.
And this will be on your voting sheet.
Number 21.
It'll be item number 21. I'm calling it the MTA resolution.
Why don't you call it ESI, Enhanced Station Initiative Resolution?
Okay, we're calling it the ESI.
Call the question.
Could you read the resolution one more time?
Yes, what, transportation?
And did you say that did I just hear that the meeting will not occur if we pass this resolution?
It might not.
Why?
Rich is just going to read the resolution.
What meeting?
The meeting was going to be one day next week at the Museum of Natural History.
Just let me say, it was going to be next week. They never do this. They didn't do it for the 4th Avenue community in Brooklyn. They haven't done it for Astoria. They were willing to do it for us, I guess, because of my relationship. But, you know, with a resolution like this, I just don't see them still coming. I could be wrong.
Rich is going to read the resolution.
Happy to
and
answer
then-
any questions about the meeting.
No, Rich is going to read the resolution, and then we will text a couple more people, because we still have a long meeting to get through.
The planned MTA Enhanced Station Initiative, ESI work being done to the BC lines was foisted on the Upper West Side with no notice and no public hearings, nor studies about alternative arrangements for impacted passengers. Our subway system is literally falling apart, and spending over $110 million on enhancements that don't improve underlying service without engaging the public is unacceptable. We call on the MTA to put these plans on hold until there are public hearings, studies about impacts on the community, and a discussion of the best use of this funding.
Yeah, wasting is not a good word.
Any good thesauruses on the committee?
I totally agree. The word foist, I agree with the concept of this, but I think the word foisting is not very respectful and it's certainly antagonistic. The other thing is, as a person who uses the M72 and the M56, it might not seem appropriate to throw this in now, but the reduced service there is really a hardship. I know Assemblymember Rosenthal has been very upset about that, has been speaking out about it.
Everybody's upset about the reduction of bus service.
And so if there's some way to perhaps loop that in here and say, you know, while we're busy doing enhancements, the M66 and M72, the loss of service reduction is particularly painful in light of the fact that we've gone to select buses on other Foxtown routes. So it's really a double slap.
Can I take just a couple more comments on this?
Hi, as I understand it, there's a lot of apples to oranges talking here. And I think we're all sophisticated enough to know that what the apples to oranges are. We know that there are different budgets. We know they don't cross over. We know that we're lucky to have this slice of the pie. The stations are scary and dark and ugly. And frankly, if they're going to make it look better, I would like better service too, but I'd also like it to look a little better because I avoid those stations. They're scary. So yay, it's not what I prefer, but let's get what we can get, because if it doesn't come here, it's gonna go somewhere else, it's not going to go to service.
Said they're already doing it in Queens. I'm glad they came now.
I would just like to say that in Astoria, where they did this, they did every other station on a fast track, and now they're gonna, and they close those 3 stations. Now they're done with those, they're going to do the other 3 stations. So one part is their phase 2 of this. And the other thing is that they did not do very good public outreach there, and it was a lot of confusion for people who were doing their commuting. And so I feel that our resolution should really focus on more public outreach, so that people can adjust their travel patterns, their commuting patterns, and especially if they're gonna do a phase 2.
That's one of the reasons we want this public meeting to, enlighten the community what's coming. I might also add that it's ironic that we're having this discussion in a way because on the 4th Avenue line in Brooklyn and the Astoria line, they don't have a parallel subway line really close like we do. So it's a little easier for us, but we gotta have service additions when these things are closed. That's pretty obvious. It's Rich's resolution, so all right, let's call the question. I think everyone's heard it a few times now. All in favor
Are we
of the
still
resolution?
hoisting?
No,
it's sprung.
You defoisted it.
It's number
How about we
21.
are concerned
Did you
about
pick a
it?
different word rather than foist?
How about we are concerned about it, something like
Yeah,
that?
what I said was, the planned ESI work, being done to the BC lines was planned for the Upper West Side with no public notice and no public hearings.
That's fine. Great. That's fine. Call the question.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? This is number 21 on your voting sheet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Abstaining. 1, 2. No, I'm just abstaining. 1, 2, abstaining for, not eligible to vote 1. So the vote did not pass. It was 10, 23, 2, 1.
Could I add something, Roberta, maybe given this resolution, the failure of this, and at the risk, I don't think I'm being wimpy.
But it seemed to me there were several things that emerged that were difficult. One of which was we didn't know until tonight, and then there was uncertainty about a meeting being held. And that's not good. I mean, we hardly know that a meeting is being held a few days from now. 2, we are all in favor of public outreach. How could we not be? The MTA doesn't come to us very often, and if they are going to come now, we need to have them come and be welcome. Thirdly, I would like to find a way for the chair and the committee to be able, or the executive committee or whatever, to be able to reach out to the MTA, work on the organizing of the meeting, and state what has happened and move toward the dissemination of information and help to organize that meeting so that we can all be part of it. I'm improvising now, but I'm trying to pull from what was a very negative resolution and our upset, and the fact that many members of the board were concerned about that.
So let's do it.
We have been doing that. Andrew reached out as soon as we had the day after the meeting, the transportation meeting with the MTA. He reached out to them. Elizabeth reached out to the museum, who was willing to give space. The museum has offered several different venues within their space on different nights when they're available. So depending upon which night the MTA is available, it will be. We will immediately, the second we know, we will be sending out information to all of our mailing lists.
Can we get them to put big signs on the subway? That's worried.
If you listen to me at the beginning of the meeting, I explained that we have asked the MTA to put up signage. If they don't, we can flyer nearby. The local electeds will send out to their mailing list. Gail Brewer's office will send out to her mailing list. I assume that other electeds can send out to their mailing list. So we will be getting the word out. Hopefully it'll be the end of next week, so we have the most time to publicize it. And our COMCOM committee will be on the case. All right, I think we need to move on to the next item.
Andrew's, it's fine with me.
Well, resolution number 4 is a revocable consent. At 50 West 77th Street, this was not controversial, and we passed it unanimously. This looked fine. Anybody have any questions?
Can we bundle it with the next one, Andrew?
I don't see why not. 2 revocable consents. Both were not controversial. You want to do 4 and 5?
Yes.
Let's do them. All those in favor?
So we're bundling 4 and 5 together. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? The vote passes 36-000.
You may know that the Transportation Committee has wrestled with the issue of secondary street namings for quite a few months and years, months by months, years. And we have now recommended a series of secondary street guidelines that you see in your resolution sheet. They have been refined over time. The wording is better, they're easier to understand, and it recommends that all supporting documents be submitted to the community board at least 30 days in advance of the date that somebody would like this hearing to be heard by us. So that's, it also says that no elected official, which is something that other communities do have, elected officials that have passed on and people revere them, they were eligible for some secondary street names, but this, not here, apparently. So, are there any questions about these guidelines? Shelley?
We are going to consider it tonight for vote?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, I object to the third, bullet.
Third.
I think that
The no politicians bullet.
we should be very, no, we should be very, don't make any assumptions. We should be very careful about who and when and where, but there are times when political figures have been major assets to our community over a long period of time and have made this community better, and so I can't see why no politicians, political organizations, that seems to make sense to me. Religious figures, if a person happens to be a wonderful community servant, or happens to be a priest, minister, imam, or rabbi, so much the better.
And we have those now.
What's that?
We have those now.
Right, and I can't see it, so I could see political organizations, but the politicians and religious figures, I think, are an overreach.
Confer with my co-chair.
Do you think that's friendly?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, Sue?
It does not say that they have to be, and I'm sorry, I read it, but I remember. The politicians, political organizations does not specifically say that no living politicians or religious figures.
Hopefully the other criteria is different.
Is that again, that they have to be deceased for a period of time?
It doesn't say that, but
Okay.
if you wanted to add that.
I went to school at University of Maryland in the era of Spiro Agnew, and the college football stadium had been renamed because Spiro Agnew was a wonderful man until he wasn't.
Is the T in his name?
Not anymore. There's nothing.
Yes.
Does it say in his?
On the second page, it's very.
All people? And I would encourage that in any case. Until the day is done, you really don't have the nation of the person's life that should be inside.
But this does say even a deceased politician or religious figure cannot be considered for a secondary street name if you read it.
We can't hear.
All right, she likes the grid. All right, any other comments?
Amendment, I'd like to propose an amendment to eliminate, no politicians or religious figures from the third bullet point. And it's been made and seconded.
I agree with that because you never know. There are people who come out of our community who were politicians, who were religious leaders, who do remarkable things. And if we want to, if the committee and the community wants to, we should be able to recognize them.
I agree.
You couldn't do Nelson Mandela or Desmond Tutu.
So you're accepting this, Dudley? Okay.
So that would strike the third bullet then?
That would
No,
strike.
it's political organizations would stay.
That would strike political organizations.
It would leave political
organizations.
It would leave politicians.
No, these are exclusions.
So a deceased beloved politician could not be eligible.
Yes. We're only taking out the public, we're taking everything out except the
Political organization.
political
You
organization.
could say no political organization.
No political organization. Okay,
And we're gonna change the first line to read must instead of mush.
yes, that's good. We like that.
Vote on the
Okay.
amendment.
Hold on, that's a different.
No, it's not an amendment, it's accepted as friendly.
We'll accept it as friendly, yeah.
Okay.
Right, even better.
Call the question.
This seems to be, this seems to be written to say that, the secondary street naming must meet each of the following, criteria.
No.
Let's see what it says.
No.
Guidelines as follows. And then you've got
Some
the
of these
splits.
are not exclusionary.
Right.
You could have-
Well, then it's written very ambiguously. The thing about the untimely death, as I read this list, it is requiring, because it should be reading all of these in the same way, that the person met an untimely
This is
death.
not the.
And what if they had a timely death?
Yeah, what if they had a timely death?
It's not the right.
Or if the manner in which they died happened not to be.
This is not the correct,
It's
excuse me,
incorrect.
this is not the correct guideline. It's not.
But we're supposed to vote on these as a guideline.
I know, but it's not.
an error.
That's not the correct.
We'll have to come back.
I think what we're gonna do is withdraw it for tonight. It's not written right. It's a different,
My point.
we're going to withdraw it. We'll vote on it at the April meeting.
This is not what the committee approved.
This is not what we approved.
Whoops.
I don't know how it got in like this, but it's not what we approved.
Wasn't me.
And,
It's an untimely resolution.
I guess.
it's being removed.
So number 6 is withdrawn.
Number 6 is withdrawn, number 7 is withdrawn, and number 8 is withdrawn. So that takes us to Parks and.
Why is 7 to 8?
7 is withdrawn because we weren't able to notify enough people on the street. And the same thing with 8, but now that we don't have the guidelines, we can vote on 8 anyway. So we are moving along to Parks.
No. We have number, Andrew, why don't you do number 7? Andrew will do number 7, and I'll do number 9.
No, we can eliminate 7 and 8, we're moving to 9.
Oh, we live in.
Why would you eliminate number 8?
Why?
8, because they didn't have enough time to notify the community.
No, but you got 9.
So we're doing
We're doing
9.
9.
7 and 8, for the third time, are being removed because we didn't notify the community.
Okay.
In a timely fashion.
Okay, we have the last resolution is similar to the resolution we had before, but much more general. There's been a lot of press recently. Anyone who's read any newspaper has read that by so many different criteria, the MTA has spent more money on projects than most other places. On average, it spends 7 times as much for capital projects. There was this anecdote about the extension of a subway line in Paris, and they spent $450 million a mile, and the Second Avenue line was $2.5 billion per mile, and the people in Paris were fired because they spent too much money. In any event, there's a concern that the subway service has deteriorated. We all can agree that there's a great need to keep up with capital spending, this MTA needs more money, but there's two sides of the coin. There's the money coming in and the money going out. So this resolution just tries to impress upon the MTA and the governor that controls the MTA to a large extent on the need to use every dollar wisely, to try to get as much out of each dollar spent as possible. And that's basically the goal of this resolution. Questions? Oh.
It should be into line as opposed to into line.
Okay, we'll definitely correct that. The typos are easy ones.
Let me just say something. I'm going to also recuse on this, but things do cost a lot in New York. The Second Avenue line had some costs associated with it that no other subway line has had associated with it because of the lateness in the time that it was built. That's why it's also deeper, because it had to avoid all these city utilities, and they had to carry muck that they found out by train to various places. They didn't actually do this on some other lines, and they also had to fix buildings along the route, the landlords of whom claimed the subway was undermining their buildings. So, hundreds of landlords made the MTA pay for shoring up their buildings. I'm all for having money used as wisely as possible and getting the biggest bang out. We also have some very high union agreements here in New York. I would be very interested to know how Con Ed and DEP's subsurface work compares to other cities in cost of per mile as well. And I discussed this with Councilmember Rosenthal, and she said she was going to look into that as well. I will also point out that, and I won't name names, but 2 governors have taken money away that was earmarked for the MTA and put them in the general treasury. One governor cut 1,300 maintenance workers in approximately 1991 and 92. And if you think that many maintenance workers doesn't have an effect on your infrastructure, you're just kidding yourself. Another governor froze the fare for 8 years, and that was just economic chaos. It may have looked great and made for a good re-election, easy re-election, but it really hurt the system, my system. So I would back a resolution that says, while monies have not been forthcoming to the MTA as needed, and by the way, I also add, New York is not the national capital, and London and Paris and Tokyo and Buenos Aires, they get the largesse of their federal government, and New York City does not. Look at the problem we're having just trying to get Gateway built, the biggest, most important infrastructure project in the country, and the president is now pulling back from that. So, we have infrastructure problems. We can't dance around the fact that it takes a lot of money to make these improvements. And if you think deferred maintenance is an answer, as many of our elected officials have done, you now see the fruits of what they've done. I mean, I think we should add some whereases.
Well, again, the resolution was designed to address the spending side of the equation, not the money. I think we're all in agreement that the more money for the MTA, the better. The point is that there are two sides to it, and we're very concerned about the spending side in this resolution. Yep.
Just a quick question, hopefully this is friendly. In the therefore, would it be possible for us to add, in the spirit of what we talked about 20 minutes ago, something about the MTA to present to the public this information, so we make it a little bit more active and really call on the MTA to do this rather than just asking for an assessment, but rather to maybe say, therefore be it resolved that CB7 calls on the MTA to present to the public and implement the following items. And number 1 would be the assessment. Number 2 would be an accounting for the spending on mass transit infrastructure. And number 3 would be if item number 2, if the accounting shows that the spending is greater per capita than spending in other cities, then a call for immediate action from our elected officials.
Well, it's not per capita because we should be higher per capita. The higher per capita, the better, actually. It's per project where we have the problem.
But I'm just saying, like, if we find that to be correct, I think we're being, I don't see any data to back up some of these assertions.
Yeah, I think having data is good.
Well, basically, that was from the New York Times article. That's where it came from. Again, the resolution is calling on them to assess the spending and to try to spend as efficiently as possible. That's the whole thrust of this resolution. It's not saying that there's X, Y, and Z that's improper. It's saying that they need to redouble their efforts to spend as efficiently as possible.
And we should, you should also add, and look into their procurement procedures, because that is happening.
Well, that's part of the spending, yeah, that's definitely part of it, couldn't agree more with that.
Clarify from my end.
Okay. Oh, great. Any other questions, comments, criticisms?
Audrey.
I just wonder if maybe it should be something like we're asking the controller to look into the MTA. Because asking the MTA to.
Police itself?
Yeah, you're asking the MTA to police itself, and of course, the MTA is gonna say, of course, we spend wisely. Sort of maybe a more action item is asking the controller to sort of do an investigation of the MTA spending.
Well, it does, number 3 does say, we call on the responsible elected officials. So I think that it could be viewed as including the controller. I just think that's a little more adversarial. I think we just want to send, put them on notice that the anecdotal evidence, the line that they spend 6 times or 7 times as much, that's not a 20 or 30% difference. It's huge. And to just look at this more carefully. And I totally agree about the transparency, because sunlight is the best disinfectant.
And I just want to point out Controller's Representative Michael.
Oh.
Still here. And listen.
We're talking about the other controller.
This would be the other controller.
The state or the
Yeah, this couldn't be the city controller.
State?
It's a state
The state controller, yeah.
I just wanted to endorse what Howard said in terms of the scandal that was revealed by the very detailed New York Times article, saying there were 200 invisible employees earning $1,000 a day for years when they were digging the tunnel so that they could connect the Long Island Railroad with one of the train stations.
Grand Central.
Grand Central. It's an absolute scandal. And as a community member, as a person who rides the subway, as a taxpayer, I have to say I'm totally enraged. We may decide to use diplomatic language, but I agree wholeheartedly with the notion of specifying that we are entitled to better.
Thank you. Shall we call the question? All those in favor?
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 30, 31, 32, 33, 33. Against? Abstaining? 2. No eligible to vote 1, so the vote passes 33, 0, 2, 1.
Okay. Pass it to Clark.
So Ken's going to, we have a slideshow on each of 3 fairly straightforward central park projects, but, well, you don't have them? Is John still here? Whatever happens? We don't have them? Anybody know anything about that? Well, if we don't have them, we don't have them. They were sent to John today. All right, not good. But Ken is going to do the first two, and I'm going to do the last, and we'll just do them without the slides. But before we do that, just a really brief, very positive update on something. Community Board 7 has scored. In November, we had a resolution before you that on a matter that our committee had initiated that had not really been brought to us by the Conservancy or the Parks Department, which involved the large paved concrete area at 67th and Central Park West that formerly was a parking lot for the concession and now is not, thanks to us, and is an ugly eyesore that needs to be turned into a green piece of park. And so we had invited the Conservancy to come and talk to us in October. They did. We proposed to you guys a resolution that I think was unanimously passed in November, asking the Conservancy to move that project of greening that parking lot way up on their list of projects to be done in the future. And we're very happy to tell you that they came back to us this last month and told us they've done exactly that. And so they have moved it up on their queue. And they're going to be looking at it probably starting in 2019, which moves ahead by several years. It's not going to be an instantaneous process. It will have community input as to ideas for the planning. But we were thrilled because this is like 3 months, 3 months later, and we got what we asked for. Ken's going to do the first playground.
Okay, we have two playgrounds, they have similar issues. So maybe you might want to bundle them, but we'll decide on that later. One of them is West 90th Street, which is known as Safari Playground. Right off Central Park West, overlooking the reservoir to the west of the reservoir. And the other is actually on the other side of the park, East 96th Street, but the Conservancy wanted to come to us with both these because they have very similar issues. And of course, Councilmember Rosenthal's district encompasses both because it encompasses the park. The issues they have in common is that they're both on high ground and they are both not accessible currently. And so these projects are to modernize them and to make them accessible and to modernize the playground equipment. And the Safari one, which is also known to some as Hippo East, has hippopotamuses in it. And the hippopotamuses are not doing so well. And they need to be cloned. They need to be cloned, yes. They're going to use a 3D scanner on them, and they're going to create new hippos. And
Hungry hippos?
I don't know how hungry. Fiberglass, actually. Fiberglass, yeah. And they're also, right now there's a canoe, and there's going to be another canoe. Because the motif is sort of a jungle swamp thing, and then you sort of go up a rise a little bit, and then you're in tree houses and on some mounds, which is going to be more of a brown motif, whereas the hippos are in this water-like blue motif. And there's going to be a user-activated spray in both the playgrounds. About the accessibility, both playgrounds, they're going to create this sort of winding path that goes up the incline, so it is not more than a 5% grade. In the Safari Playground, it is going to require the cutting down of 5 trees, 4 pine trees and 1 dogwood. According to the Conservancy, the trees are not in great shape. They're not overly large trees. They are going to transplant 2 trees at Safari to hopefully make up for this partially. And also, they're going to have to take out a tree on East 96th Street, but they're going to replace it with 2 shade trees. So it's a net plus in that case. What else? User-activated ground jets. They're going to lower the fences also. This is part of what they're doing all over when they're redoing the playground. Right now, there's 7-foot fences, which were put up in 1941. They obscure the views, particularly at Safari. You get beautiful views of the reservoir, which you can't see right now to the fence. So both fences are going to be 4 feet.
That's Commissioner Silver's.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually can kind of said what I was going to say, which is part of this initiative. Well, first of all, these 23 or so playgrounds are on the periphery of Central Park. There's sort of an ongoing kind of every 20 years take a look, fix them up, and the Conservancy has generally had money to do that. So these had not been renovated for 20 years or more, and they're getting that now. But in general, as Kim kind of hinted at, with more than hinted at with the fencing thing, part of the initiative is to integrate the playgrounds more into the surrounding landscapes with softer borders, maintaining safety in terms of fences and gates, or access, but to make them seem less standalone and more part of the park landscapes, and reducing the fence height does that. So I kind of guess you want to see if you have questions.
Yeah, also I just wanted to say that the Safari, they're going to start construction later this summer, pending required approvals, and completion expected next summer. And the cost will be 1.9 million, which is privately funded. And the other one is going to cost 3 million because it's more of a grade, and the ADA access is more important. So any questions?
Is it really West 90th or is it West 93rd?
96.
Oh, East 96.
East
No.
96. West 90th.
Is it really West 90th or West 93rd? Because I don't remember.
West 90th. Yeah, right above It's just to
Oh,
the
just to the left.
north of
Right,
that.
right, right.
Yes,
Just
Susan.
at the same advertisement for the Hippo Playground, or
Yeah.
Safari Playground, rather. If you haven't ever been, which I had not until we started this, it is so worth going to. It's absolutely enchanting, particularly in a day and age when things aren't always enchanting. You can tweet about it. I just love the people that you share. It's really charming, and it's got a view of the reservoir, and it's just spectacular. It's really, I've lived in New York since 1984. I've never seen this playground.
The slight note on that is it's illegal to go unless you're accompanied by a child.
Yeah.
What I think the comment in terms of like letting the public know, it's just spectacular. There's a sign out in front that says, rather, you know, if you're interested, if you use this playground, come to the Parks and Environment Committee, we're discussing it on whatever day it was. And then it said, you know, if you have any questions, we're going to be doing a renovation. And if you want to find a way to get there, the way to do it is to walk from 86th up to 90th, because you all voted on the restoration of that nice winding pathway, and it's been completed and it looks lovely.
It sounds just like the subway.
Great commercial, Susan, thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question.
So we're bundling,
Or
10
by-
and
by
11.
manual.
10, 11.
10, 11. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So the vote passes 32-0-0-0.
Okay, I have the pleasure of describing the proposed renovation of the Comfort Station, which is a New York term for bathrooms or restrooms or toilets, at the southwest corner of Central Park. Many of you may know or not know that there of the comfort stations in Central Park, those that are attached to a concession are the responsibility of concessionaires to maintain, and when there's a new concession or a major turnover or a major capital work, then often capital work on the back of it, the comfort station is part of that. But there are numerous comfort stations in Central Park that are not part of concessions, and this is one of them. And it sits somewhat below grade. It's at grade if you're in the park, but the grade of the park there is below that of Central Park West. It's actually quite an attractive building architecturally, but it's in need of renovation. It is not, the inside of it is not accessible. I think you enter at that grade, but the working parts of it are not accessible. And it is not heated and available for year-round use. So the nature of this renovation, it will involve entirely redoing the two sides of the interior, making it entirely accessible. It will involve making it year-round with heating and whatever else it takes to do that. Infrastructure work. They will be adding irrigation lines to the landscape in the immediate area in the park. Don't have irrigation now. And the exterior of the building, which I think I said is rather elegant, will be restored in kinds of metalwork, the brickwork, etc. So we approve this unanimously. And are there any questions? Okay, so call the question. Those in favor?
Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So the vote passes 32-0-0-0.
Yes, it's next.
So I'm going to get started, but Jerry's going to pull up the pictures. This first application is at 17 West 67th Street. And this is an application for some window replacement. I'm going to describe the application, tell you the committee vote. It was a split vote, so although we voted to disapprove, we had 3 yes to disapprove, 2 not. So we will present the other side from the committee's perspective, and the applicant is here to speak on this as well. It's a building where all the original windows were steel casement. And while many of the windows have been replaced with double hung aluminum windows and also a multi-grid,
there are still a significant number of the original casements that exist. So what we're looking at on the left side of the slide, the top, is the actual piece of the application that's here. The piece of the window replacement that's before us. The applicant is proposing to replace all the windows within the apartment and make them consistent so it feels more unified. But the two sets of windows that we're looking at are the ones that are street facing. So on the left is a pair of windows, the far left, a pair of double hung windows in the living room that were replaced in a manner similar to many others in the building. So replacing two casement windows that butted together that had a total number of 20 panes with unevenly split double hung windows that have the same number of panes but have a different method of operation, and meaning they go up and down now instead of swinging out, and also a different sort of distribution of how the panes are divided. On the right-hand side of the top left are the two existing steel casement windows that are in the bedroom. They are in very poor condition and have never been replaced, and they're leaky, and the old ones are hard to put child guards in, although the new kind, there are ways to do it that are much easier. The lower photographs are the other parts of the apartment. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the top is the existing windows, and you can see casements and double hungs, and below is the proposal for the new, which shows on the right-hand side, the far right is the sort of replacing very similar in kind, it's 8/12s in double hung, and then replacing the casement windows, which again have 20 panes, with similar 20 panes, but it's 8/12 instead of being 4 at the top and two columns at the side, and then a 2x4 in the middle. So it's a different visual effect. Let's go to the last slide, which the applicant sent in, where they then did a count, and the number actually of original windows that remain is less than half, but not insignificant. And so our committee, after discussion back, that while there were quite a few that had originally of the original windows that had been replaced, this was not an instance as we had found in the past where even though all the windows were multi-pane, you're faced with a building wanting to replace windows where everything's 1/1. And so returning to the original multi-pane would be really, it would take so many generations probably to get back to the original that it didn't make sense. This was one where it was much less clear-cut because they were regularly spread out, but there are enough there that 3 of the committee members felt it was inappropriate to go to this different kind of window, different in the sense of method of operation as well as in configuration. So so the committee voted to disapprove, but it was an uneven vote. So now Peter is going to represent the J and Peter side, and then we'll have the applicant speak.
Well, it's not that the solution is so great, but on the other hand, you have something that is halfway there already, and there's no way that the building can be changed to be all the same. So I felt that to require the applicant to go with something that almost half of the existing tenants did not do or would not do is going a little too far. And I didn't feel the visual effect was that terrible to have a double hung in this particular case. I think the worst thing is that in either case, it's kind of a fake 6/6, which is typically being done now, where they take the glass and embed on the outside and don't make it essentially real. But that's not what we're debating here. So I felt it's fine to go along with it.
And the building has no master plan and no intention to do, as much as we always will recommend a master plan, no intention. Wait, now we have the applicant here, Michael Yavlin. Would you like to? And we'll leave your slide up so you can speak to the.
Great, thank you. And
I've never been to one of these, and this has been a very interesting experience, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to do this and to know that, you're looking out for the interests of the community is great to see. I thought that was a very fair recitation of the facts and what's gone on here. The only things that I would add, we've been very conscientious about selecting the windows. They're very high quality. They imitate the muttons that existed in the original historical ones very precisely, and we feel like it's a great window for the building. We are very conscientious and we don't want anything that's going to look badly. But the reality is the building's a mix. The horse is kind of out of the barn in terms of the original windows. It's a real mishmash of some that have been replaced and some that haven't. A major consideration for us is doing something that looks great and is of high quality, but the casements that the Landmark Commission's asking us to do cost $11,000 more than a typical double hung, and that's just a lot of money to us. And we feel like we've made a selection that is kind of a nice compromise, where they're going to be great windows that match a number of the windows that already exist. Actually, the majority of the windows have been replaced. So we ask you to kind of take it all under consideration and vote your conscience, I guess. Thank you.
One question, was that 11,000 per window?
No, that was 11,000 in total, but it's crazy how much it costs.
And just to add to small points, I also think that these were enhancing what's there, so we could leave the double hung in place, but we're looking to enhance them to a higher quality double hung that will look better than what's in that room. And on the bedroom side, we don't have close-ups. While they are casement, they do not look good from the exterior or the interior.
Jerry, go back to the first one, because you can show them that in the first of the three.
Yeah, the ones we'll be replacing are these two here.
Yeah.
And you can see that these are the double hungs. They're much poorer quality than the ones we'll be replacing with. That's why we would like to replace them. But we do have the option of keeping it just due to the expense. We can keep them. We think it's better for the building. The windows we're going to replace with are going to look a whole lot better. But at the same time, there's a price consideration.
And just the last point, just from a quality of life, I'd like to have nets, they're just not as practical as well.
Screens. And I will counter that there are screens available from casements too. So, there are available as well as child guards. Okay, so now, Matt, will Match Person and Clary?
This isn't just about the building, it's about the block. I happen to live in the building too, and have for more than 50 years. This is a block, probably, I don't know if any of you know a more beautiful block, apartment buildings on the Upper West Side. It's on the National Historic Register of Buildings, the State Historic Register of Buildings. Every building on the block that has restored over the years has put in beautiful uniform windows. I spoke to 2 different people on the board. I'm not on the board, and I asked them about this, and they said they deferred these windows and said to the owners that they would like to hear what Landmarks have to say, because when they do a master plan, which they really intend to do, they will take that into consideration very much, whatever Landmarks goes for with these windows. But on a block like this, to put in windows that don't complement the building, and those windows are the most important physical point of the whole building. The old casements were really wonderful. A lot of people have repaired them over the years, and when these new windows came in the 80s, there were no efficient casement windows. Now there are. You can get casement windows, and I know there are interior screens, and I'll be glad to give these people my interior screens if they would like them. I think you can still buy them though. So I very much would like to keep the casement windows. I think it's for the building, for the block, and if any of you haven't walked down the block, please do, and you'll see how important it'll be to the look of it. Yeah, just by chance, I do have Marvin casement windows with interior screens, but I have 2 questions. One, I think I followed this, whether the building is required or otherwise, all of the replacement windows, all of the windows on the front, on the facade here are multi-pane are divided like, right? Nobody's got just 1/1. So
Simulated, yes.
simulated or otherwise, but they're not, no, but they're all,
I think there may be one or two,
Uh-huh.
but for the majority go to this 8/12. Can you go to the middle slide though, because there's a design issue that I think it's hard to see, but this is, I think, for those of us on the committee who couldn't support the 8/12. 8/12 makes 20, and the alternative configuration also makes 20, but the originals had a line of 4 fixed as a transom, 2 columns of 4 fixed as side legs, and 2x4 or 8 in the center as the operable section. That would have been the kind of window sitting in here. And so while you add up the same number of panes, there's a very different visual effect between the original and the replacement, in the sense that there's a heavier line here, a heavier line here and here, and here on the double lines at this point. These are consistent with all the ones that have been replaced. So I'm not contesting that that's inconsistent, but the question is, was this the appropriate direction to go? And should we, just because it's done, has been done before, say that every new one is going to turn their back on this? And in fact, if their 2 windows are in poor shape, perhaps there are others. And so maybe those future restorations or replacement windows don't have to, it isn't, by default, they shouldn't have to go to this design if in 5 years they need to change it. That was the rationale behind those committee members who supported it.
okay, so my other question is, in the real world, which is ultimately an LPC on these questions, where this building has no master plan, what has LPC, first of all, I don't even know if LPC has already ruled on this application, because sometimes that happens, but let's okay, so assume not. What has LPC been doing on this? And I know my own building, where the original buildings were 6/1, and out of probably 150 of those on our front facade, maybe 6 are left. LPC is nevertheless requiring, and the others are all either one great big pane or a double hung 2 panes, undivided. LPC is nevertheless requiring 6/1, even though there may be only 6 of those out of well over 100. So I'd like to get a handle, if I could, on what they're doing on this.
We have nothing, because it isn't, they come to us. It's a small application. The building has no master plan. So really, our concern is this is sort of setting a precedent and tipping it further away from what was the original design, which had a different sense of texture.
And this will also affect the building's master plan.
But it has none now, right? No.
Right.
No master
Okay,
plan.
so after Sue, I know Paul also has something to say, and, okay, go ahead.
Sure. I live in the building also, so I mentioned I live here, and I'm an excess of caution, I'm not going to vote.
No,
because I did not call the ethics board and check ahead of time, so, oh well. But I can speak. And they're a lovely couple, I'm very well with the building. They're doing a great job in the renovation. And it's been tough. It's a long renovation, so they had my sympathy. So I went back to some of the board members who've been in the building longer than I have to say, everybody else has been given the ability to change these windows. How can we say no? But the board member said that all of the windows in the front were changed essentially simultaneously the year before the building was landmarked. So well over 20 years ago. There hasn't been a new building put up in the front of the building in more than 20 years. So it's not like every time somebody moves in, they put in new windows, and they got to put in the less expensive ones, and we're changing things. It's been 20 years since there's been a new building in front of the building. And I get that number from the board member I spoke to, because he was the last person, and he put casements in, and not the double hung. I truly do believe that it's a value to the building, it's a value to the apartments, and it's a value to the street to have the casements. So while I can't vote, I would prefer to see the casements, sorry. Oh, the other hope I have is that the windows that were put in were so bad that people are going to have to replace them. So ultimately, very quickly, the entire building ends up switching over to casements back to the
Let Nikki speak, but also I want, Paul has something to say, so.
I think Vicky and then we'll
I'll be quick. I just think it's a slippery slope. We have a real obligation, not only to today have a Windows look, but how they're going to look for the future. And as far as I'm concerned, we should stick to the historic built windows. I know, I feel very sorry for this couple. They're very nice, they're very sympathetic, but the bottom line is we can't be moved by that. We have to be moved by what makes the historic facade look like the historic facade. So I'm very much in favor of the casement windows being placed.
Oh, you wanted to ask me?
I just want to know if any of the old replacement windows are still around. And can they be restored? And can the ones that are in bad shape be restored? The original ones.
Yeah, there are some and they can, that's expensive and not energy conscious, but they vary. There's some in their apartment and there's plenty in the building.
But
Yes.
only one of the two. We can't have matching windows and do what you're suggesting. We can only do in the bedroom because that's where they exist. They've already been replaced in the living room, and we don't have those anymore. So our windows wouldn't match in the apartment. If we renovated one and then replaced the other, we don't have the old one.
Just a point of information: if you're turned down, are you going to get casement windows or leave the existing windows?
It's the renovation's taking longer and costing more than we expected. It's going to be a decision that we're going to make in the future.
So in other words, if you're turned down, the windows that exist now can remain, in which case we don't get, the street doesn't get the casement windows.
I didn't do the last thing you said.
So if you're turned down in your request to replace these windows, the windows that are there that are not casement windows will remain, possibly.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, our goal would be to replace it long term, but like, not immediately. I mean, if you can go back to the last slide, I don't disagree with you on the slippery slope, and I don't disagree that about the statement on the street. We love the street as much as everyone else. That's why we're so happy to be living there and looking forward to it. One thing I will say is every other building on the street has matching windows. Every window in all the other buildings are identical. This is the only building on the block that has mismatched windows, and it's because of this legacy issue, pre-landmark. I guess those buildings were landmarked longer or had master plans in place. I don't know what the history of that is, but the majority, if you look at this building, you wouldn't necessarily know. And so this idea that we're going to go, that you're setting a precedent, well, some of these, the building was built in 1921. This is 97 years later, and you still have original windows. So you're essentially setting policy that may not come into effect for 100 years, and at a certain point, the practicality of it kind of is lost. So,
Actually, I'd like to say something that counters that, I'm sorry, but
That's a debate.
well, this is an important, from our committee standpoint, this is.
I don't think we're having a debate, do you?
I think every time something's said, someone remembers it.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
Based on what I heard from Sue about the discussion with the board members, if all the double hungs were replaced 20 years ago, it's highly likely that in the short term, they're gonna need replacement as well. And the question is, do we want to go by replicating the replacements or returning to the original configuration in an energy efficient, but historically more accurate model? And that's really the issue, because there is a tipping point here. And while, as I said, our committee, typically, if the whole building is already 1/1s, even if the originals are 6/1, we are not going to say that they should go back to the original, because that's virtually impossible. But this is, while not the majority, close enough and with the potential for recreating. And if you think of the building like London Paris Apartments, they replaced with a style of window that was casement, originally casement, and replaced it with casement, and still maintains that character. So our committee voted to disapprove, so a vote to approve the resolution is an approval of the disapproval. All in favor?
So
That's confusing.
just to clarify again, so this code is about to disapprove, okay?
I think people are confused.
Okay, we disapprove. If you go with that, vote yes.
If you don't want to approve the windows, vote
If you
yes.
agree with disapproving, go vote yes.
So
So all those in
Oh.
favor?
All those in favor of the disapproval?
If you like the couple.
One,
I'm not gonna
2, 3,
vote.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
All those,
All against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Abstaining? 1, 2, 3. Eligible to vote? 1. So,
Two.
2.
So it just fails.
So the resolution failed, those at 12, 15,
15. 12 to 15.
3, 2.
Don't forget that quick.
So then we should turn it around as a resolution to approve.
So Peter should do that.
Oh, right, Peter, you do it. Okay, the resolution.
I wish we had it. Can I just say one more thing? I have one more thing. Can I say one more thing?
Well, let him make the resolution and then you can comment.
Well, I'll wait till he makes the resolution because I think that's not at all
it's gonna be
representative.
number 22.
Okay. That's not at all a representative picture of, to see how those windows look.
The resolution's gonna be number 22. Well, I don't think it'll be 13A, but it'll be on 22. Okay, you have it.
Approved.
The resolution should be, as presented, with,
That's it.
My comment is that picture doesn't really represent what the windows look like. The way it's presented there. If you saw the real facade of the building, you would see how much the character of the building depends on the casements.
Jerry, go back to the first one, which shows, I mean,
Even there,
unfortunately, we didn't have great photos, but so you can walk.
You can't see it.
Okay, so, resolution to approve, the window replacement as presented. All in favor?
Okay, so this is under 22, is 13A. All those in favor? This is to approve. To approve the application.
Allowing the non-original windows.
All those in favor?
The opposite is.
Okay.
You voted, and last time you voted in the yes column, that was you were agreeing to disapprove. If you voted in the no column, you were against it. So now, if you voted in the no column, you probably want to vote in the yes column.
The opposite.
So, all those in favor?
Oh, God.
Yes.
The opposite.
But we're voting now is in approving the application of the replacement.
Approving their application.
Okay? So if you vote yes, you're approving the application.
What did I approve?
Allowing the
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand.
Okay, all those in favor?
You're allowing the.
1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16. Against? Against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9. 10.
You don't want it.
Wait, how did that happen?
There was another trickling involved. I didn't know.
All those in favor?
Abstaining.
So abstaining?
That was uncalled for.
1, 2 abstaining, and not eligible to vote.
Not eligible to vote.
That's 2. Okay, so the resolution passes 16-10 to 2.
She switched it up.
So we'll have the
That's all.
resolution
Just-
approval get down to where
She kind of
Mark.
like
Are you
switched
sure?
it. That's what really was.
Okay, it'll be done.
Okay,
I mean, I was for it.
Told you coming to the board to work every year.
So was that 13A?
Yes. 13A,
On the
but
last
it's under
line?
number 22. That was 13A, but it was under 22 on your voting sheet. All right, we're moving on to the next.
I think the next three are gonna go much quicker.
Good. I would hope so.
Oh, sorry, there's nothing controversial.
So this next application is for, a T-Mobile store, I think it is. This is at the bottom of the building, it's at 69th and Broadway. It's where the old Don's Japanese restaurant was.
Are we on
and I
number
think the nail
15?
salon. So this is, let's go to the next slide.
14.
14.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Go over.
So this is showing the,
drawings, and what I have to look online, because I couldn't see that. Yeah, so look at it. So this is the existing conditions that shows the side street of the building, which has limestone facades and replacement windows. And then there are two storefronts that are being combined. This is the existing condition. Let's go to the next. And this is the proposal, which will have renderings on, which will make it easier to read. But the old rusticated stone base, the terracotta base, no longer kind of exists behind this. So the proposal, let's go to the next, is, that's the existing condition, sorry, the two different storefronts. More detail on that, and the sides. So you can see, go back to one second. This part is masonry, it's terracotta, but it's got a sort of an off-white color to it and replaced old windows. Go ahead. And the proposal is taking the sort of T-Mobile typical visual, which is really bright white with this pink detail, toning it down slightly, but using these simulated stone tiles that contrast. They're not intended to look like the material above. There is none of this original material here. And then taking certain details, the base, the sill, and the cornice, and adding it out of gray concrete to help make that transition. And our committee, you'll see, when we do look at a few more images, recommended that there be a similar detail added here to make a transition vertically between the old and the new. So these are now black metal windows, shed awnings, and gooseneck lighting. Next slide, please. Another view of it. And the side street, they're going to replace the windows that are in those existing openings, which are currently white, with black, again, black finished windows that are actually blanked out because there's retail behind it and some AC units. Next, and that's another view of it. So the committee voted to approve with the addition, which the applicant agreed to, of these two little gray pieces here and around the corner where the transition occurs. And I think it was unanimous vote. So that's it. You want to vote first? Yeah, I do. So all in favor of approving the renovation to the storefront?
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Sorry?
I'm not voting yes.
21, 22, 23. Let's move on again, please. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Abstaining? Okay, so the vote passes at 25-4-0-0.
The next application is another window replacement at 505 West End Avenue. Okay, so this is a lot of windows on the 6th floor. They're replacement windows. The building has, they're replacing these in kind. In this building, while it's original, I believe, has 6 over 1s. They're all 1 over 1s. These are the existing conditions. Next. So this is. Let's go to the next one. This is, I think, this is the existing, yeah. So these are the existing windows and the proposed windows in there. And the only variation from what's there, it's going to be really 1 over 1s in kind. Are there several windows that have AC grills on them? But no, I guess they're facing windows, so they need to do this against vents and the committee. Any questions? No.
Yeah. All question. All question.
Okay, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, that's 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So the vote passes 32-0-0-0.
Final application is a very small rear yard enclosure addition expansion. This is a little building at 119 West 87th Street, and the committee, years ago, I forget how many, 10, 12 years ago, approved this full-width two-story addition, rear yard addition. And the applicant has come before us and wants to expand or enclose this terrace area, and to make it an extension of a bedroom. So this is, I'm going to walk you through and then we'll come back to this, but this is the existing and this is the proposed. We go to the next. So this is it in elevation drawing next. This is the section of what's there, which is the two-story addition with a glass floor and a terrace to bring light in and a bedroom. And the proposal is to basically move this wall out and add a skylight, and so expand the bedroom because they never use the terrace. And there's the enclosure. And so let's go back to the first one now. The applicant is proposing to take the original, the very first one. Take the windows. These windows actually right now sit further back and physically move them forward. Eliminate the transom that's sitting back there and add a glass skylight. This is all remaining and it'll be like a Juliet balcony. So the committee found that it was reasonable.
Call a question.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Somebody voted against it, why?
That's Peter.
Peter, do you want to speak to that? Peter, I think you were the one that opposed it, and I think it had to do with just intruding into the donut and adding shadow to the neighbors.
And
A little bit. Well, the sides are brick, and they're bringing up the brick that are solid brick. They're going to bring it up another story for just that little.
Were the neighbors notified and did they have any comment?
Yeah, there was little evidence of consideration for neighbors. Didn't show very much of a neighboring facade, and I just felt the additional intrusion into the rear yard, which makes it, I think, into a 2 or 3 story living room, I believe.
No, it's an expansion of the bedroom.
Expansion of the bedroom, but excuse me, I'm sorry, but a kind of unnecessary expansion in that way. I voted against it.
And there were no speakers on it. They did post within the time frame that was required. So no immediately adjacent neighbors came to speak about it. But that would have been Peter being a neighbor or nearby neighbor felt about that.
All
right. So
call
a question.
Okay, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Against? 1. Abstaining? 1, 2. So the vote passes 29, 1, 2, 0.
Okay, thank you. Now, BCI, number 17, new SLA applications. I am happy to report that of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 venues, 146 West 42, and the last one, 1012 Amsterdam, are both owners of restaurants that already exist in the neighborhood, so they're building another spot. 1012 is building a third spot in the neighborhood. We're very excited about that. The 307 Amsterdam is the site of the former Shark Bar and then Chinese restaurant. So there's going to be a noodle shop there, a Thai restaurant. Lion's Head Tavern at 995 Amsterdam is actually a transfer of ownership, and you have to go through the application again. So it's considered a new application. And we voted on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these to approve unanimously. Any questions? No. All right.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? The vote passes 32-000.
Thank you. Now, we can bundle 18 and 20 because neither applicant, we disapprove them because the applicants did not appear at the meeting. So I understand number 20 is going to appear at this month's meeting, but we had to vote because we had the applications, or lack thereof. Well, we have the applications there, but not the applicant. So I'm asking you to disapprove 18 and 20.
So, ¿votos in favor of the disapproval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So the vote passes 32-000.
Thank you. And number 19, we had our meeting on Valentine's Day, which Mr. Ritchie reminds me is one of the most important days in the restaurant business. And for this poor man, he happened to be the owner and the applicant and showed up. So, with all of that. And we did approve this. And we did, that's right, we normally don't change things on our agenda, but thanks to Andrew's, understanding and instruction, we put him up front, Mr. Vino Leventino, and we're asking you to approve this. This is a cafe, a renewal, for the unenclosed cafe, 6 tables and 14 seats.
Michelle, this is the one on Broadway?
This is
Because they also have an enclosed one, right?
No, this is not the same one. This is the one on 74th, on 94th Street, actually.
They're on the side street?
Yeah, this is not, I know which place you're thinking of, that.
It's like a deli.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Not that.
This is,
So is this the old Indian restaurant?
yes, that's it. But they've been there for a little while.
And has there been a cafe in that space for the previous operator?
No, this has been this restaurant for a while.
I'm sorry, so there's been.
This is a renewal application.
Oh,
So they've had this cafe.
Thanks.
So I'm asking you to approve this renewal, for Vino Leventino.
Okay, all those in favor of the approval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 32. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So the vote passes 32-0.
Muchísimo gracias.
See you next week.
Motion to adjourn?
Without objection.
People, can I have your attention? It's almost over. A motion to adjourn.
Without objection.
Okay. Stay tuned for the people, stay tuned for the meeting with the MTA next week. And we will be taking out flyers, information. Thank you all so much for coming. Please, Mr. She's over there.
One's coming.